Hey, what's going on guys? My name is John Park and welcome to another tutorial. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you guys my design process and walkthrough on how I kind of design and research for environments and keyframes. So typically in a studio setting, or whether you're doing freelance or if you're getting an assignment, you're going to always be given a design brief. And usually briefs are very vague and it can be interpreted in many ways. So I have here an example of a typical design brief that you would get from an art director or a production designer. And the brief says, "Space wreckage on moon, astronauts are in search of any survivors." So there's a lot of things that we can think about here. We can cross-reference movies that have done this, but more importantly, what are some of the references that we can find today, or that is very close to what this means. So I kind of went ahead and I did some Google search on just overall wreckage, not necessarily space wreckage, because I wouldn't assume that there would be any available space wreckage photographs on Google. So I typed wreckage and plane wreckage, and this is kind of what we got. And what I'm looking at here is I just want to get a sense of different types of ideas, but also just the kind of feeling of, this chaotic man-made structure that's been completely obliterated and just it's torn to bits, right? And I love the scale of these guys, like this guy right here taking a photograph. This guy right here taking a photograph of one of the engine parts, and you can clearly see him, just kind of in juxtaposition of the background, and it's just so strong. It has such a powerful image. But again, the design brief is, we need to show space or astronauts, space dudes, kind of finding this kind of stuff. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna start off with a series of sketches, and these sketches are something that I do during the beginning phases of any concept design assignment. Is I try to find an interesting composition or a shot to work with. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and actually pull some of this stuff here and use as reference, but mainly I might even use it as part of my painting as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull some of this stuff here, and maybe even pull part of this one here. And what I want from this is that I just kind of want to create the feeling of, something very cinematic, and just provoking in terms of like the image and the storytelling. And I'm just gonna stretch it and just kind of have a really landscape, very filmic kind of landscape proportion here for this here. We could probably match it to this just to kind of get it in the same size. But I'm just going to go ahead and separate these into some sketches, some sketch layouts. And let's just go ahead and start with 3. And 3 is always like a nice number because, it's kind of like you either like 1, 2, or 3, and you want to provide some ideas to your production designer or art director, but you don't want to overwhelm them with ideas, unless they're asking for a ton of material or content, then you can go ahead and do so. But honestly, for me, it's just kind of like starting off with the base and then just getting started is good enough, and then just to get an idea. So I know for space, since this is like a space theme, I'm probably gonna really get this in more the range of it feeling like it's on the moon, because our brief does say space wreckage on the moon, astronauts are on the search of any survivors. So I'm probably gonna try to get this in the feeling or vibe of it being on the moon. So a lot of desaturated colors, maybe just maybe some blues or something like that. And if you guys, this is just kind of preference in terms of what I think works. You guys can definitely choose your own sense of color composition and what you think works. And a lot of people actually, use actual reference for color, whether it's in photography or movies or stuff like that, but it's up to you guys. But these are just sketches, so I actually just want to kind of find some interesting compositions here. And most times I actually work just with this sketch, and I just trying to use the textures here to kind of find something unique in the shot or in the composition. So and you can do these anyway. You can actually do these in black and white, but I like to just kind of jump right into color. And I'm going to then use kind of the textures here to kind of start playing around with, smudging some detail around a little bit. Maybe get just a little bit more, maybe a little bit more atmosphere or something here. Just kind of push this stuff back. And I definitely want that moonlighting, so maybe I can get like really some really bright colors or something. I'm going to kind of darken this down a little bit so you guys can see the sketch. But I know, like, space lighting definitely has like a lot of strong graphic lighting, right? So even if we have something that's like bleak white like this, we know for a fact that we're going to get some really graphic look. And that's something that I definitely want to play with, is just kind of the strong graphic nature of it all. And a lot of times I'll actually work this way, where I'll use an actual photo here like this to start playing around with ideas. And getting some, just kind of the base of a concept or a sketch in. And it's always nice to have these types of shapes already pre-done for us, because it helps us to kind of visualize, what else this stuff can be. Maybe this is like some turbine or something. In terms of the value, like the darkest value here, I'm most likely going to use the colors and the value of our little image here, just to kind of add on stuff and kind of figure out what this image or the shot's going to be about. And even the darks here, if there's like rubble or stuff like that, definitely want to use the values of this to really help build it up. Now the shadows are probably going to be very strong, right? So if we're going to have some shadows, we're probably going to have, you know, shadows that are going to be super graphic, and so we're going to get really graphic lighting. So I definitely want to play with that and push it as much as I can. So add some nice like blues. I know like you know, adding these blues are probably like, you wouldn't get that kind of atmosphere, but you know, I'm just gonna kind of fake it just a little bit, because you know, it's space, but it's the stylized version of our little space image here. You know, and these sketches shouldn't be something that should be like full-on renderings. It should just be kind of a concept or an idea just to kind of get us started. So they can be nice and sketchy, you know, just to kind of get the gist of the idea. And that's what's great about doing these types of studies or these little comps, is that you can immediately get some quick thumbnails generated this way. I'm just going to use this darker value to really break up and create a sense of wreckage or something here. And here, maybe adding just a little bit more of an engine-like structure. Now, I typically do work relatively small in the beginning phases like this, because I want to not just get too caught up in the details of the image, especially at this phase, because it's about the overall concept, you know. Maybe some rocks and stuff, since we are in space. You can imagine there being a ton of rocks. Maybe we can start to see or get an idea of like the other side of the spaceship or something, just like completely blown out or obliterated. But again, I want to use the values here, the darker values, to kind of sculpt that out. And I'm going to use a soft brush just to really kind of fade this a little bit, so it's a bit like, kind of like there's floating debris or something. Okay. All right. Probably darken just a little bit here. Now I know I have that selection made here on the turbine, but just wanted a relatively cleaner edge there to work from. Just kind of like, you know, pick little highlights and things like that. You know, I don't know if maybe we want this to be a bit more ambiguous and not see an obvious aircraft of some sort. You know, this is a wreckage, so I mean, when this thing landed, it probably just blew up, just came down with full force. It just completely just exploded on the way down. So I know we have like a kind of a rock-like form here. You know, something like this, I'll probably want just a little bit of ambient lighting just hitting it just a little bit here. But for the most part, this stuff's gonna get, you know, kind of this more cooler, kind of this really bleak type of light source for the most part. Okay. Always use really broad brushes for just kind of, you know, for detail that's more further back. You know, anything that's like super specific, I generally try to, you know, use smaller brush strokes. But for things that are relatively you know, further back in the distance, then I'll use pretty large brush strokes. I'm just going to use a little bit of a blue here just to kind of kick up that nice contrast there. This can be nice and flat. I'm also thinking maybe there's a slight gradient or something. Even though the lighting here is really bleak, but maybe as a light kind of wraps around and turns, we're getting just a little bit more of a cooler vibe. Maybe some strong shadows and stuff like that, just kind of casting in. Probably not going to get much of a reflected light here, so I'm probably going to dial this down just a tad bit. I mean, I definitely want a little bit of this bit to show, because I don't want it to be like completely just dark and black, but just something there. And again, even though this is a thumbnail, you know, like, it's always really good to show as much information as you can, you know, even at a small sketch, because we really want to try our best to make the director or the art director or the production designer really excited about kind of the idea that we're presenting in front of them. So whatever we can do to kind of generate that excitement or to get that approval, you know, we just want to present some really neat ideas. And if your ideas are nice and clear, even at a sketch phase like this, you know, it'll be really beneficial for us when we get to the final, because then we can just start translating that Okay. All right, let's add our little dudes. Look how crummy it is. Do not paint like this, because if you look up here, you're gonna be like, oh my god, this is like the worst thing in the world. But paint at a relative distance that will make you kind of look at all this stuff with a fresh eye and just kind of look at just the details and stuff. Okay. So I'm gonna start painting our guys now. When I'm painting the guys, I want to work with kind of a nice darker graphic, and I'm looking here, and I feel that a lot of this stuff here, I want my attention to be here, so I want a lot more of a darker graphic. So if that's the case, then I definitely want to kind of darken or dial some of this stuff down, just to kind of really play up the crashed element here. So I'm just gonna do that by like knocking down the highlights just a little bit. Maybe there's some sort of like light fall off here. It's a bit stylized, but because usually in space, you know, you almost imagine everything just being like equally lit and flat. But in this case, we're just gonna stylize it just to kind of get that cinematic feel and vibe. get this thing. A lot of painters love, you know, what is called a lost edge. So this is where like your object kind of blends into the background, and it just kind of creates like this nice transitional area where your eye can just bleed into things nicely. Okay, but if this is my area of focus, then maybe I want the subject matter to be here, like our astronauts, right? We want our guys to be kind of within this space. So maybe we can have our astronauts here. And they can be relatively kind of small in scale, because I definitely want this to be a lot larger of a structure. Just get kind of our little figure in place. You know, and that should be pretty good enough. Just to kind of get the general idea of an astronaut there, and maybe we can have one guy up here on the top. Maybe he's like looking out or something on top of this rock. Obviously we have this rock here, and it's a very compositional stump. It's like right in the center. So let's utilize that center, like what it's gonna be used for. Maybe we can make it so that it's doing something. It's framing, or we're putting a character right behind it. So that we feel like, you know, it's not, we're kind of behind things. So that's kind of what I liked about the Wreckage, is that there's so many layers, you know, and we feel like we're instantly behind the action, kind of witnessing this thing. Okay, so that's kind of coolish. Since we have our character back here, I'm going to simplify the background and just kind of really, by doing this, it really kind of makes our eye drawn to the astronaut, because it's a very, very negative space here, and we see it very clearly, just like this guy right here. We see him very clearly. Okay, so that's one idea. Let's go to the next one, and I'm probably gonna try my best to adopt the colors. You know, this is a free-for-all. I mean, we're gonna go as, you know, utilize everything as necessary. You know, everything that we need. And I like this shot. This is actually quite interesting, because it has a lot of really cool elements that we can probably already use. Now we can think about this in many ways. Maybe, you know, the characters are here and we're seeing this, you know, more of an aerial view, or maybe there's another alternative. You know, maybe this time we're looking inside or something. Maybe they're venturing inside of, you know, the heart of the actual shipwreck or something. Maybe that's what's going on. And maybe all this stuff here that we see totally just obliterated, right? So just to kind of prevent myself from painting on this image, I'm gonna just crop it out. I'm also gonna kind of darken this. I realize that I can get a little bit more dramatic, so let's just kind of darken it up a little bit so our light scenarios, you know, a lot more punched out. So working on this piece here, probably want to try to create the same sort of, you know, bleak, really strong kind of graphic. What's great is that we have the colors from this one, so if I need to utilize any of this, it's all free game, right? And this is what's great about, you know, having one good variation, because you can start to borrow pieces and elements really easily. Now, let's try to make this a bit more graphic. You know, what about this is striking? You know, maybe we have a character that's walking up here, you know, all through this wreckage. Maybe we have someone that's kind of going through all this stuff, and his partner is right behind him, climbing through. Even though this is like, you know, zero gravity, but you almost imagine that they probably want to traverse this space with caution, just because, you know, there's people that have died, and there's probably things that are slightly unstable and moving around or something. So whenever I do this, whenever I create a character, like, especially if they're in the thick of the rubble here, we really want to simplify what's around them, because otherwise it's going to be incredibly hard for us to read. We're going to have a hard time reading their form, their action, their body language, stuff like that. So the clearer all this stuff is, not that we have to obliterate anything, we just have to make just a little bit of space, just a little bit of real estate. It'll be a lot easier to kind of look at and to understand. So the thing about space is that, you know, it probably doesn't have reflected light. You know, it's not going to reflect the sky because there's no real sky. So shadows tend to get really dark and kind of graphic. However, if there's things that are getting a little lost, we're gonna take the liberty to stylize it and just add a little bit of slight reflective light. Because there are objects around it that are getting light as well, and we're most likely gonna we can most likely utilize the light source that it's getting hit from the sun and bounce it over, just as a way to kind of lift some areas so it's not just completely pitch black. And maybe this is right here is kind of like where we see just kind of this really vague internal structure, and this is kind of the graphic read that we might want to create for ourselves. And keeping it this loose here on the ground is completely fine, because again, this is just a sketch, and our clients just want to see really cool ideas, because they'll understand, they'll know that, like, that this is a work in progress shot and not everything's a final render. So even this sketch right here is more than suffice. Yeah, maybe we can play with more shadows or something, just to kind of play up the kind of the graphic nature of it. Maybe there's shadows that kind of create an interesting composition so that our eye can actually follow along. So the way I like to think about shadows is, I like to kind of create a sense of some sort of pattern. So if there's light, we generally like to follow light as a path, and by doing that we want to use shadows to create those light paths. So I'm going to just do this, and just to kind of create those light paths really start to help. Because now our eye kind of tends to know, like, where to kind of move throughout the space. And we can make it more obvious by creating an actual path here like this. So we can look at it and be like, oh, okay, I see the yellow brick road kind of deal, So that's kind of what this is like. It's a very effective compositional way of setting up your shot by doing this. It just makes things kind of more easy to set up the ground plane per se. Like little tiny rocks, so those things are going to cast shadows as well. And again, a lot of this stuff here in this area is going to catch the most amount of light. So everything else I want to kind of dial down in terms of the focal point, because again, this is a cinematic type of shot, and in order for me to show off my design, I'm going to strategically light just the areas. So I'm gonna probably dial some of this stuff down just a little bit, so it has like a nice fall off here. It just makes it feel more like ominous too, And maybe this guy's even entering, so we can have like half his body is starting to get plugged into shadow. So now we really get the sense like, okay, shit, this guy's going in. He's like, wait. And again, just simplify all this stuff so it's graphic. You know, this is all, it's all about nice, clean graphic reads. The easier it is to read as a graphic, the nicer it reads as an image. Something I probably want to keep in mind is just the general weight here. It does feel the same, so I'm probably gonna make this thinner. I don't know if that really helps, but or bring this out more towards us. Maybe we can open it up. So there's kind of a nice general opening here. This shape here, I'm gonna just open up that shape just a little bit here. Get some more rocks and, you know, wires and stuff coming down. You know, craziness, right? I mean, this is like a full-on wreckage. Alright, so there you go. There's our second shot. I think this is pretty good enough to kind of pass off. I'm gonna use a little bit of this nice light effect here. Does seem nicer when it's a lot darker. You know, if it has a realism to the gritty feel. Just want to kind of look at everything as a graphic piece and see if it's you know, if it's interesting as an image, as an idea. Okay, all right. Usually, like, sketches like this can take up to, you know, a day, depending on how complex you want to make it. But, you know, as an idea, you know, that's actually pretty. It's actually a pretty good start, especially for you know, art directors and you know, studio houses to really review the work, because I mean, having a series of sketches like this will really help kind of, you know, make some direction or provide some direction. Okay, cool. So that's one. One more down. One more left to go. Add some like little rocks and stuff. When I look at this more, I'm like, yeah, it needs more stuff like this, you know. So always a nice balance. You can always go back and forth and see what you want to add or take out. You know, just to help beef up the sketch a bit more. Especially when we do stuff like this, we wanna turn this this kind of stuff in as a package. You know, it's one of the most important things, especially when they look at it, they're gonna be like, oh cool, man, this awesome set of ideas. Okay, cool. Let's just kind of back off the little bit of value here. It's getting a little punchy. Punchy as in like I want to group it just a little bit more so our eyes don't get too stuck here. And I tend to do this just to kind of simplify. So again, it's creating so much contrast that our eyes want to just kind of stare at this area for a very long time. And I don't want that. I don't want that for a viewer, and I don't want that for our art directors to look at, because then next thing you know, they're going to be nitpicking areas where it shouldn't even matter, you know? And that's such a hard thing to deal with, because there's going to be a lot of art directors that are going to nitpick hell out of your work. And you know, we all face that. We all have to be ready for that too. It's the kind of nature of our job. Alright, cool. Alright, one more. Let's do this. So I'm thinking about, I love the composition of this actually. It's a bit cheap because I'm probably going to use it as is. I'm just going to dial it down and use some darks to kind of sculpt in, you know, something else. I don't know if it's going to be the front of a spaceship. Maybe it is, and maybe it should be. You know, maybe this whole part is a spaceship that's all kind of abandoned. We gotta bump up the scale, so and a lot of this texture stuff is really nice. It's really good for us to kind of work with. Oftentimes I actually like to kind of reuse parts of my sketch, so I actually use part of this sketch, get some of those colors, and just kind of block it in, you know? To kind of get this thing going. And what this gives us is a nice base that we can already put in and just think about color and just overall arrangement and how we want, you know, the crash site and everything to look. And a lot of this stuff here I'm probably gonna wanna fade into a little bit of shadow. And obviously I know space doesn't have reflective light, but it's always nice to have shadows that kind of vignette and gradate like that. Just makes it so much more easier to use and to kind of stage things. Okay, there's this propeller. Let's eliminate that. Maybe it becomes part of some sort of, debris and destruction. Maybe something like this. And then here, we want to make some sense of like how our characters can actually go into this kind of wreckage or this structure, right? Because they're looking for survivors. So we need to try to make that very clear that this is an open structure that's been completely torn to bits. So I'm just kind of painting in just some damage here. Again, we're playing with a lot of graphically. This is very, very, very much. You can kind of see, the reference below, right? It's pretty funny. But graphically, this is very much kind of in the range of a lot, like 70% white and 30% dark. So our characters, we want to probably have them either stand out as darker silhouettes of some sort in some way, or if we're going to have them as white silhouettes, then we need to have some sort of dark around our characters, right? This is the only way we can really showcase that. So it might be best to do that just because our astronauts are white in terms of value, or if they are dark, then it has to make sense on like how they're darker in value. So if we want to stage that, then we need to find some way to kind of allow for the scenario to have them in shadow. So typically I don't just render characters in shadow without any real reason for how that's gonna work. However, if we do have a character here, let's say we have like 2 astronaut characters that are approaching this for the first time. With caution. Maybe another one here. Or maybe the other one is actually in light. then we need to really justify how and why this guy is in shadow. So maybe what's over him is kind of this looming shadow of another structure, and that's one way to kind of get that scenario to work, that light scenario. So if this is the case, then we can definitely have our astronaut character be a lot darker in value. So this is a solution to that. So this is kind of the way I would do that here. Now, because our character is dark, we need to make sure that the object here is a lot brighter, or we need to make sure that our character is relatively darker. So it's either going to be one or the other that we need to always kind of play up or play down. So maybe this guy's has more of a cooler tone of light. And all around him is going to be relatively white and brighter. Even the ground, all that stuff. So that way it just simplifies the readability and the graphic. Because if it's too complex to the point where we can't make out the figure or anything like that, then it's definitely not going to work. Okay, so this is something that I highly recommend just keeping in mind. Alright, simplify this ground with the big brush. And then around the character, right? Again, these dark areas probably don't help, so I'm gonna most likely try to fill in some positive light shapes here, just to really pop out the silhouette of our character. And even anything that can add a lot more brighter element here, I'm gonna do that as well, just to really kind of get our silhouette of the character out. Getting a really clear read, it's all a part of the design of the shot. So we definitely want to make sure that all that stuff is legible. Okay, and even using existing values to help, you know, add to the design is something that I'm definitely going to do. Maybe there's like a landing gear or something that totally just malfunctioned and just broke. And the light also seems like it's coming from here. It's getting hit here, right? So if that's the case, then probably going to get a lot of shadows that are, you know, being more directed like that. And if that's the case, then we can really kind of simplify a lot of the stuff that's here, so that visually we understand that light is actually coming at an angle, coming down at an angle. Make selections here. Probably really want this to have a nice flash of light, brighter value here, just to kind of punch that up. Oh. Something like that. Okay, that's cool. And then I'm just gonna soften it up. Softening meaning just going to give it a little hint of ambient light occlusion, where light is bouncing off and it's really kind of making this thing kind of glow a bit. And also anything that's in the distance here behind that silhouette, I can definitely push back meaning. And even things that are way back here too. Again, this crash probably happened a few months ago, or you know, it probably hasn't been here for that long, so we can still get a lot of debris and stuff that's kind of floating around, and that's kind of my logic here. You know, I mean, I'm sure you guys can definitely prove that wrong and be like, nope, there is no debris. We'll probably do this and that, but just to kind of make it a little bit more cinematic, I definitely want to just add just a little bit of that floating debris, like some shit just went down, you know, some stuff just happened. Okay, so there we have it. We have our 3 different design compositions, you know, as a starting point, and I'll definitely take this and start to really, you know, build and design out one of these shots, you know, in the next phase. Let's just clean this up a little bit. So we did this relatively quick, you know. It only took us about an hour or so, and in the hour we established three awesome, you know, starting thumbnails. Not saying that my work is awesome, but you know, it's good enough to kind of get the idea across to our clients here, and we want to make sure that it's awesome to us, or to them, so that, you know, they have some sort of direction, and you know, they feel really good about what we produced, and that way we can kind of move on to the next phase. Now that's where I'd like to take you guys to the next phase. You know, that's going to be what we're going to focus on next, just in a moment here. But this is what I'd like you guys to kind of think about. This is what I'd like you guys to establish, you know, before we jump in on the final rendering. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me anything, and let's get started on the next one. Alright guys, so once we have our thumbnails, I'm actually going to pick one. I'm thinking about doing the top right one, just because it has a very cool narrative, and just compositionally I find it to be probably the most interesting out of the 3. Now when we're working with clients, they're most probably going to dictate which one they want to further develop. So if I was an art director and I were to choose this one, then there's a couple of things that I probably want to keep in mind. Is one, obviously the textures, but two, the general focal area and what this entire thing's about. So I'm going to try to bring in a bit more information here, really tighten this up, and really kind of get this a lot more legible than it is right now, so that we can actually kind of understand a lot of the elements here on a more high resolution basis. So what I like to do is actually pull up Google and get some elements here. And I think we're going to start off with maybe more plane destruction, plane crash. We'll go plane crash actually. And I actually just want to see if there's any good high resolution images that we can use. It's pretty gnarly looking at all this stuff. However, a lot of these textures are really relevant. This is great. It's really great for us because we get a good sense of a lot of this detail and destruction that we can actually use into our paintings. Obviously a lot of, yeah, that's some of the photos does gets pretty gnarly, so definitely watch at your own discretion. Gets pretty graphic really quickly. So alright, we'll do this. Let's see here. Thinking about maybe some other additional bits of the engine, which is really cool. Thinking about something like that's pretty nice, but maybe we can get some more higher res images. And we can even just get an image of a jet engine if that's the case, but this angle is pretty nice. If I can find a higher res of this one, that'd be great. So I'm gonna go to large, see if there's something that's pretty good. This looks like it's gonna work for us. Okay, cool. Alright, now when you guys are photo referencing, you know, try to be very selective and try to use, you know, try not to get too distracted by it, because you can go on for hours and hours, you know, just photo referencing. So try to be very very quick about what you're doing here, because this phase right here, I will tell you from experience, has consumed a lot of my time, and it most likely hasn't really helped me finish my work or my paintings. So the next thing I'm going to look for is some really good textures for the astronauts. So now I'm going to do astronauts. Let's bring this in here, and I most likely want to use or find kind of the back view of something. Even this is pretty cool. These little characters, but you know, just as a texture, or what we can put into the back, you know, is a pretty decent start. It's weird. It's definitely tricky to find this stuff. I mean, the only stuff that's that you're gonna find is, you know, anything that's NASA related. Even this is great too. Just be mindful is if you are going to use elements that are based off of some artist's work, you got to make sure you get permission, or at least you know, do yourself a favor and try to change a lot of the elements there, because one thing is, it's not cool to use another artist's piece of work. So anytime that there is artwork out there that that I find interesting, then I'll most likely try to contact the artist to see if, you know, to see what he was inspired by, or if I can even borrow it. But you know, it's probably best to even just use it as inspiration, look at it on the side, and do your own interpretation of it, because you know, you definitely don't want to get caught using it. So Let's see here. Alright, back view, come on. No back views, huh? Okay, let's look at something like this. Oh, there's some back view stuff here. Not too bad, not the best. We'll do a back view of these guys. This is cool. Yeah, this will definitely help. And again, I mean, our scene is relatively small, but you know, I'm assuming when you guys do your reference, you know, your characters will vary in size. You're gonna have some that are relatively, you know, larger and relatively smaller, depending on your scale and what you're working with. This is perfect. These are some really nice textures and photos that I can use. Okay, now that we have our characters, character ref, and then this is gonna be our debris ref, right? The next thing I'm gonna look for is some ground. Okay, it's on the moon, right? Or it's on a planet, but we're gonna say the moon. And if we look at the surface of the moon, there's a lot of cool things that we can actually adopt. Like, this is pretty great, but a lot of times you're not going to get the best photo reference, or you're not going to get the best images, just because, I mean, it's relatively really tricky to find, you know, really good stuff that was shot on the moon. So, you know, I'll just do kind of a quick once over and see if there's anything that we could use or anything that I can adopt. But for the most part, I think I'm just going to try to come up with my own image here. It's actually not too bad. Just the direction of light isn't as useful. This is just more of texture, but we'll put this here as an option. Ground reference. Okay, the next one, I think what I'll do is, this is actually pretty cool for like rocks and stuff like that. But the closest thing to this kind of ground is actually looking at oh, that's nice too. Sorry, totally got sidetracked. But the closest thing is actually looking at some reference on like the sand or something like in the desert, and just kind of turning it black and white. That's another alternative. So what we can do is we can actually click, oh, there's some Mars stuff here. We can actually click like desert surface, and we can get some really nice just grounds that we can use to help out with some textures and stuff like that. So probably just gonna pick a couple from the desert series, and just be careful not to click ones with too many plants or vegetation, because then it can kind of defeat the whole purpose of it being on the moon. And even that's really interesting too. Just has like some really cool forms we can work with. So I obviously want something that's relatively not as textural, like not too many different like rocks and stuff like that. I kind of want areas of smooth surfaces so that, you know, I can actually paint in and kind of match more closely to my sketch. This is actually nice too. This is all on the Mars. That's awesome, man. There's some really great photos. It's all the little rover, or it's taking like all these awesome killer photos, man. It's nuts. Like, I remember a couple of my friends who have been working in the industry for quite some time, like, they had no access to all this stuff. Like, getting all this kind of reference on Google was just like, it was non-existing. So it's crazy because now as concept artists or as designers, you know, we have so much access on the internet. It's really cool to see. Alright, okay, well, we'll kind of end it on that note and get started, because again, I am falling into the trap of basically hoarding, where I'm gonna just look at images for hours and hours, and you definitely don't want to catch yourself doing that. So we'll end it on that note, and we'll get started on the painting. So first thing is, I'm probably gonna use just some of these graphics and just or some of these textures, and just see if it works. I just want to see how it looks on the actual painting before I actually make any hard decisions. And when I mean hard decisions, it's like saying that I'm gonna most definitely use this particular texture or whatnot. So I'm just gonna try to get it into my scene as best as I can. You know, some of this stuff is great for like rocks and stuff on the side here, so I can probably click and sample that. And again, I want this to feel it's in the same color tone, so we can do a color balance to match it in, or we can do a match color. So you bring that up under adjustments, and you go to our PSD here, and I'm just going to try to match the image on my background. So that's kind of what I have right now, and I'm going to fade it down just a little bit because it's looking a little harsh. But that's not too bad. It's looking, you know, it's a decent start to kind of get things plugged in. So I always use this, and this is something that I learned actually from an artist. If you guys know the name Mache Kuchara, he is like super mega badass artist, and he just has a lot of different cool tricks and tips to share with you guys, and you guys should definitely highly recommend getting his Gumroad. And he actually started a school, online school with another artist, really talented artist named Anthony Jones, and Ash Thorpe, and I believe Jama. And these guys are just killer at what they do. So I highly recommend checking out their stuff, because they have such a wealth of knowledge. And a lot of stuff that I've actually picked up was just some of the stuff they've shared. So really good stuff. Oh man, this is cool. Okay, so let's get this one in, and I'm gonna put this also on match color and just try to get it blocked right into the same area. And when we put it in, we're gonna have to really simplify a lot of this stuff, guys. I mean, notice how it gets so like busy quickly, you know? I like the simplicity of this. This is really nice. So what I'm gonna do is, let's just go ahead and use this as a start. I'm actually going to try to just paint in just a little bit of the texture that we need, and just in the areas, because again, just because we got a photo texture doesn't mean we got to use it everywhere. I know we always feel obligated to, like, just because we have something like a photo reference doesn't mean that we got to use it immediately. So I'm just kind of sneaking it in here and seeing where it can best fit. And a lot of times I actually try to utilize, you know, several different types of photos to kind of get things working together. I'm just testing out here too. Okay, cool. I'm gonna darken this. So it has kind of the correct exposure levels. Because this scene is so bleak, like everything is like really bright. And again, it's always good to kind of check your sketch. So I'm probably going to have this on top just to periodically kind of see how much of it is still true to what we've kind of laid down here. Because it can get easily very overcomplicated. And if there's anything, I want to make sure I kind of maintain its graphic nature. So as we do this, I'm probably going to want to just start compressing just so I can start painting on top. Just make sure you guys save. There's nothing worse than completing an entire painting and not saving. It's like just that's soul crushing. I've literally had that happen to me on so many occasions. It's not even funny, man. And a lot of times it's like I probably really don't need a photo texture for the pants. I mean, it most likely doesn't make sense just because, you know, it's something that I'm gonna paint out anyways. But you know, if it helps to kind of get it in, just to kind of get your brain thinking about certain things, like level of detail and all that stuff, then you know, why not? Go ahead and use it. But the outcome of it's not going to be super photorealistic, you know. So cool. Such a really cool helmet, man. It's like an old school astronaut helmet. I think I even might want to use this bit here. Again, my focal areas are these guys, so I definitely want these guys to have the most amount of attention through detail and also through contrast. So I do whatever I can to kind of maintain that, to provide it. It was a very similar process to, you know, the previous videos that I've done. If you guys haven't seen it, be sure to check out some of my other tutorials. You know, I often kind of use a lot of photos in my work just to kind of get the idea started, and then from there just really start building up the image and building up the overall concept of the shot. So I want to make sure that it, you know, that it's fairly accurate in terms of the materials that read. This is where I just love kind of going back on top and editing it down and just simplifying the overall image. You know, because, you know, all this photo business here can get a little too much. So I just kind of want to use what I need and then just kind of simplify. Okay, I'm gonna actually duplicate this and compress it down, because from here I actually want to just start painting, and I'm going to start adding in just some areas of contrast right behind my character. I definitely want kind of a darker, I definitely want like a darker you know, sort of graphic behind the character here, just so that it reads really nicely. And again, periodically check to see, you know, if it hits kind of the right notes graphically. And there's things like, you know, character's head can be a bit brighter, you know, the helmet and stuff, just to really pop it out. Maybe the arm, stick the arm out a little bit. Kind of give it that nice gesture out. I like a lot of the rubble and stuff that's here. It's pretty interesting. So let's try to find a way to get that to start working for us. I honestly, like, I'm probably one of the worst when it comes to layer organization, just because for me it's just, I just want to just paint, and if I make a change, I'm just gonna paint it on top, just so I'm only just thinking about, you know, really the image and not necessarily organizing it. So this is something that, you know, I do want to just warn you guys that this is a preference of mine. It's not the way to do it. You know, I think it's very smart of, you know, of people to kind of, you know, layer organize and to have things separated and to be able to, you know, go back and make changes according to what the client needs. But when it just comes to kind of image making and just painting, like I just want to like just paint it and not have to worry about 2,000 billion layers, you know? It just becomes a layer game so quickly. So you can see how I'm like simplifying that area. So we turn on and off, like just really trying to get this area to be just juicy, you know? Try to get this. Just really try to get that that kind of light source to really bounce off. just to have it be really nice and strong on our character. Okay, so focal area, I'm most likely going to try to put everything, all my attention and energy here. Okay, and I probably want to create different ways of kind of drawing our attention through composition and light source. And I'm going to, obviously we're using the road here to do that, but I'm going to point all of my elements here, and I'm going to do that through just adding more contrast, but for the most part this is going to be my focal area. Okay, so continuing on, let's go ahead and just start looking at some of the debris and all this stuff. And I'm just going to start picking and choosing some of this cool reference here to see what we can add. Let's put on top. This stuff is great. Like, a lot of this stuff right here just has so much textural character that I can most likely utilize in the painting. And this stuff is awesome too, because now with this I can definitely use onto my painting. Like, even this like debris, man, this is gnarly. Like, all this stuff, like everything in this photo I'm gonna use. This is pretty awesome. Now where I use it, we have to really figure out, but I'm just gonna select some cool parts and areas just to kind of start locking in. It might end up, we have to just be careful to, you know, not get too influenced by the photos, because otherwise it's gonna look like, oh, an airplane crashed in space. You know what I mean? That's like kind of weird. So we definitely don't want that. However, I do want kind of the concept of like, holy shit, look at the textures on there. That looks gnarly. It hit some asteroids on the way down. I definitely want that impression. Okay, so I'm trying to color correct to kind of get it right in that same kind of vein. It probably needs a bit more blues. And there's different ways of doing this. This is just kind of something that I learned. But yeah, there's different ways of color correcting and getting your image to feel like it fits. Do a little bit of that. I like this piece. This is a great photo piece right here. And just the shape of it's really cool. I mean, it follows our sketch. I mean, even though the sketch kind of does something like this, but I kind of like the shape, how it goes down. Now this is where I'm gonna start painting on top of it, kind of obliterate anything that I don't need. That bit of yellow is pretty cool, you know. I'm just gonna keep it there for now and see if it's worth keeping there. It might not be too distracting. I was thinking about photos, like what I learned is, you know, when you put it in, it looks cool, and then it might end up working against you because it starts having a little bit too much, it starts getting too much attention to that area. So might even like knock this down a bit. I don't think we really need it. It's getting, notice how it's getting really, it's pulling our eye away from it. So I'm going to knock that down. This is like the dark hole that this guy has to go through. And narratively, I mean, you know, if this was for like some like sci-fi horror, you know, maybe they have to actually really get in there and, you know, figure out what's going on or what caused the plane crash. That's looking pretty cool. I'm most likely going to duplicate this and just do something where I'm gonna actually vignette and darken down this corner here, because I want our eye to really kind of stick in this area. So by having it brighter, it wants to just kind of exit out and creates a really weird graphic shape there. So by doing this, it naturally creates a soft edge where your eye can kind of ease away. This is where a lot of the painting principles of understanding edges and stuff like that really help and come into play, especially when we're editing at this phase. I do apologize. I mean, I'm actually recording this live and also speaking at the same time, just so that you guys can hear the clicking and tapping of my keyboard. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's something that I just want to, it's easier for me to kind of explain what I'm doing rather than actually having to record a separate voiceover, even though that would probably be a lot more cleaner. But I do apologize in advance if you guys are finding it to be annoying, since I stop and I'm like, oh, shit, I forgot I'm like recording something. Okay, I'm gonna save a lot of major highlights for the end because I still want to just get all my elements in here, and then from there we will figure out what we need to basically bump up. And bumping up is something that I'm gonna do as we get closer to the finish. Okay, let's get this in the same tone. Now I can do something where we use the match color to see how it looks, and relatively it's not too bad. You know, it kind of gets it into the right kind of palette, so we can actually do that. Sometimes this doesn't work all the time, so it's just a matter of, like, you know, what kind of level of exposure or color or temperature that you need for your painting. So, and since I'm only I plan to only use a section of this into the painting, that's all I'm actually going to use it for. Just play with our blending options here. Actually see if there's some stuff that I can pull away or erase. Okay, so this actually has a very bright area, and what I'm gonna do is, I like the dark graphic here. However, I feel that it needs more defined details here, so I actually created a mask and I'm actually just painting and revealing where I think I should need some extra details. So it's probably just gonna need some extra stuff here. Now again, that's very much a texture from an airplane, so I want to be careful of that. So we need to just kind of go over and simplify these areas a bit, and then just kind of start to reveal some stuff as we go. But again, anything that's really bright, I'm gonna just save to the very end to really start figuring out my lights and darks. But at this phase, it's just kind of getting our details and not worrying too much about kind of the highlights yet, but just making sure that the forms and everything kind of read nicely. Now again, this is kind of our little area of interest, so I'm gonna create just a little pocket of light and atmosphere right here. Just to create a little bit more interest, so that our eye looks at this little negative space and just starts to see some of the more revealed debris and rocks and stuff. So again, this is our focal area, so a lot of most of our information should actually go here. And just kind of look at it compositionally. I mean, does that help with our view? Does that help with the readability of it? Is there anything that we can do to kind of like bring that up to make it a little bit more interesting? Like maybe we can actually start pointing at this thing. Obviously you don't want to create arrows, like, you know what I mean, but something to just kind of like get our eye to kind of look in that area a bit more. But just keeping in mind, it's really simple graphics. I love doing like edge highlights here. Stuff is always nice to kind of play up the graphic tone of this. So a lot of things I learned actually about edge lighting is that you can actually describe, you know, the uniqueness of a form just by using a little highlight there. Now notice as we pull back, we see just that thick kind of a rectangular shape here, so probably doesn't really help to have that shape. However, I do want maybe just some things here. I definitely want some dark value right where the legs are. Just still when we look at it, we're like, we can actually distinguish and see the character. Because when there's so much debris like this, we need to be very strategic on how we actually represent the characters. So our sketch, I mean, it's still relatively nice and simple. I mean, it says a lot about, you know, just, hey, punch it out. But you can see we're starting to really refine this area, and it's starting to feel fairly decent. There's a couple of things that we can do to bulk it up. And I think I really liked the simplicity in some of these areas. So again, this is great because I do like the rocks, but I don't like necessarily the amount of contrast. My eye is definitely getting stuck there. So let's create a layer here. Let's lift all this stuff. And what I mean by lifting is just kind of, let's just do something like that. We can even simplify a lot of this stuff here and bring it back to kind of what we had originally in our sketch. And it's okay because, again, having details everywhere doesn't necessarily, it's not what's going to make a painting good. The readability of a painting is what's going to make it look good. Now, if we use photos and it helps the readability, then that's exactly what we want. But if we use a photo and there's too much going on and it just gets out of control, then we definitely do not want that. Use a little dot brush here just to get kind of a little bit more breakup in the textures. And it just helps kind of create a nice little patch of sprinkles of details and stuff like that. I actually created these little dot textures for a painting I did for another video for this whole Miyazaki series or tribute. But it's actually really nice because you get so much nice little range of sprinkles of detail and stuff like that. Okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, I got some more debris. Now with this debris, again, let's look at our sketch and see what we got going on. Maybe this debris can be something that's way off to the side, or something where we can help justify, you know, some small details. Maybe it can be this. But we just got to keep in mind the graphic nature of our sketch here. I don't want it to be get too lost. So if we have that debris, kind of wind down a little bit on that, make it a little bit more cyan, and just gonna create a little mask here, and we'll just see where we can actually fit it, because again, you know, if it helps with the readability, great. If it doesn't, then I don't need it. I do that. I'm looking at this and I don't think I need this piece here because it starts to compete with that. It has the same kind of hole. You see that? It's weird. So these are some of the things that we got to be very careful about, because there's a reason for why we had that initial sketch, because it feels really good. And also we don't want to deter away from what the client approved on. So that's another big thing to consider, is that, you know, the client actually approved of a certain look. So I want to make sure we kind of hit all the right notes on that. Yeah, I don't think it necessarily helps to have that, so we'll just leave it open so it can be a nice little open area. Okay, we got this little bit here. Maybe this is like kind of the propulsion system or something, or the exhaust of our spacecraft. Alright, graphically, this thing's gonna be dark. Let's push this guy back. Also, even color, too. There's some nice like little debris bits here that I can probably use just in this area here, because we have a little bit of abstraction of like brush strokes that I needed to kind of make sense of. So I'm going to use this little texture here and just kind of apply it to this area so it feels less obscure. Because again, this is it's in our focal range. So just like a camera, like our eyes are gonna need to understand what is happening in this area, and everything else that's not, then it can be a lot more looser and more interpretive. But since this is in our focal area, then I want to make sure that this stuff has a most amount of contrast, and also just, again, it reads really clearly. So a lot of this stuff here, we're gonna have to work it down a bit. Kind of like the exposed engine bits here. It's actually kind of what makes this shot look fairly interesting. And this piece up here, I don't know if it's really helping that much. Maybe we can just kind of ditch that one. Have this piece here. This is really neat. I actually wanted to use for the interior or the side of this thing, just as like some sort of large bit. But again, there's some things here, like there's a dark graphic here that I didn't really resolve. I just realized looking at the sketch here, there's a dark graphic here that either it's saying that that's an edge of a structure, or this is actually the inside cove. So that's something that I need to really figure out and resolve. So if there is a dark graphic here, then let's go ahead and make that just more of a texture. So that's a bit less confusing. And maybe we can use the textures of this bit here, just to kind of give it that receding, you know, structure that's going back into this dark area. Probably not going to see this stuff here, so let's just go ahead and darken this stuff down. And then a lot of this stuff as well, it's actually going to get fairly dark, so let's go ahead and darken this down as well. I'm actually going to darken a lot of this stuff here and let it just kind of vignette out. Now this is where we have to start defining that edge, because again, in my sketch, this is just kind of this ambiguous, loose area. So here we have to really figure out, like, okay, some sort of engine bit here. It's a lot of crumbled pieces. But if this is an actual engine bit, then we need to show just a shape where it ends. Otherwise, it's gonna be very, very hard to understand why this is, why this is all kind of weird and ambiguous. But maybe we can just kind of pick and choose some areas to reveal and to hide. Gonna recycle that piece. There's a lot of debris right here, so I'm gonna recycle that piece and see if I can add like a little bit of an overhang right here.
tricky. It's like every time I add more detail, it just kind of doesn't want to. It doesn't want to look good. It's like nope. Add more detail. It's like nope. It doesn't want to fit. It doesn't want to look good. It's just. It's like to me. It's like it's getting way too overcomplicated. So probably use this. Maybe we can just kind of kiss in some of that stuff here. Okay, I'll just paint stuff here. And then we'll match, go ahead and match the graphic value. It's starting to kind of get a little bit of this nice dark here. So I'm gonna add that. Okay, cool. I'm most likely gonna try to resolve this area. Whether it's gonna be resolved, it's gonna have, you know, just a little bit more cleaning up to do here. So even that tends to help. And then here, I think I want to see a little bit more something in there. Let's duplicate this. I'm gonna dial this down a little bit, bring it more into the blue range, and I'm gonna use blend modes and see what we can get. Just want to see if we can just build a little bit more complexity, subtle complexity. It creates just a nice little edge there, so that I like. See what else we can do here to kind of beef this thing up. Might be cool to have maybe just a hint of like a propulsion engine here. I think that's what's going to really help benefit this is understanding and knowing if this is an actual engine bit. because there's a lot of texture here, but these little pieces here don't really help me, so we could probably just trash that. So at least contextually, that makes a lot more sense when we look at it. So we want the art director or our viewers to like look at the image and understand like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. You know, otherwise it's gonna be like this kind of ambiguous guessing game. Go ahead and paint that part. I still feel like this part's a little, it's like not satisfying. I don't know what it is. I just think it's like ending on a weird note. Here, let's look at some of our reference. Man, that is so cool. It's cool, but I don't know if I can use it, so let's just bring it in. Just because I know it's cool doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna work, but let's see what we can do. That is awesome. It looks like a spaceship. Same with this bit here. Nice engine piece. Just the amount of debris on all this is fantastic. Good thing we had our reference page. And when I use it, you know, always want to make sure we slightly color correct this stuff. Probably get it more into the cyan blue value here. I'm just gonna go ahead and just simplify. Just want a little bit of texture here. And it's just really right there that we're kind of banking off of. Because all this other stuff is kind of, it just kind of became a little bit noisy. I guess we can have dark here, but I don't know how that look. Yeah, I just don't think it really fits. However, when I invert it, I get some interesting patterns on the floor that maybe we can use. This feels like it's something that we can actually possibly utilize. Just as a nice ground texture. At least it helps kind of simplify this area a bit. I don't know if we want a big piece here for composition reasons. I know I have a dark shadow corner here, but maybe this might be a bit more interesting. It's kind of the classic, you know, foreground piece. Okay, put this in here as a start. Let's add in our bit of texture here. Kind of darken that down a little bit here. So trying to give this a little bit more just visual play and fun without it completely falling apart. And I kind of like the abstractness of it. Like it looks like a ship that kind of crashed. Because again, my sketch, I'm like, damn it, what the hell did I put there? It's a lot of rubble, a lot of stuff, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like we have to start really defining that area just a little bit more. Because I believe I used this particular texture to kind of get that thing started. I don't know if we just need more debris back there. I mean, visually it's not too bad. You know, it's a lot of stuff that I feel like it's, you know, there's a lot of areas that's working and a lot of areas where you can definitely just simplify. And even some of the stuff that I've painted before, like a lot of this stuff, I mean, we can definitely use more simplification. Again, it's getting a lot of light here. From just this form, so I know we added that like structure back here. Now it's kind of like, well, we added it hoping that it would actually add to the logic, or, you know, making sense of the structure here, but it's definitely not allowing me to do that. It just doesn't, it's not quite making sense. So these are some of the real struggles that you guys are seeing me deal with here, and I'm sure you guys have experienced the same struggles as well. And it's just like, at this point, the most important thing is just the editing process, man. Like that in itself is the hardest part of painting or designing. It's just kind of picking and choosing and knowing what you want to keep in versus what you want to keep out. And there's a lot of fundamental rules that I'm sure that we've learned in school, and it's like, you know, a lot of that stuff we know the principles of all that stuff, but to practice it and to do it correctly is another thing for sure. Alright, we'll just go straight up debris. Just more debris back here. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming along. Let's hide this guy for a second. Let's just see how it looks. I felt like when we had this piece, it's initially cool, but it's like now it's kind of losing that nice graphic of it just being kind of this big bold piece. It's so funny. It's like the more we go over the sketch, it's like let's go back to the sketch. Okay, cool. All right, all right. I'm gonna use a part of this guy here just so we can get some of those textures. for the most part. Looks like we're just gonna have to paint a lot of that stuff here. It's not bad. We're about in our second hour in, and already we've kind of accomplished quite a bit. We started with our thumbnail sketches, and then now as we're refining it, now it's kind of we're closing in on the ones that we're starting to choose. So realistically, I mean, this is something that I would say, you know, at a studio, this is probably easily a full day's worth of work. But when you have all the right research and all the right it can actually be executed fairly quickly. Let's go ahead and darken this guy right here. So we want that nice graphic. Almost kind of want this guy to have a slightly different gesture. Maybe he has his arms are in or something. Okay, let's do a compression here. And now let's just start to paint out. Let's go ahead and just start painting. It's like, finally, let's just paint. And simplify. Simplify what we need, simplify what we don't need. There's a lot of unnecessary textures in here that we probably don't need. It's something that I've personally always battled with, is I get way too crazy with the textures. So for me, it's like, you know, it's like, yeah, I gotta always just kind of put in stuff and then delete basically everything I've ever just like put in, you know. simplify this stuff here, just so it reads as a much more easier graphic, especially with the rocks. I want to see if I can actually get some more rocks, especially for this little corner here. Or just use space rocks. That works too. I just feel that it might be just graphically too strong and kind of not what we initially tended on to. Yeah, it doesn't have that openness. It starts to feel really cut out. So that's one of the things about foreground, guys. Like, you know, I always want to put foreground stuff, but you know, got to be very careful about how we go about it, because it can probably, the idea of it's really cool and it probably can work, but a lot of times it might just make the shot get quickly stifled and just look really, really, you know, have that really cheesy look to it. Maybe that might work. I'm trying to see if that is worth putting in. It's not too bad. It's like open enough, and it's giving me kind of the nice, you know, open path that I initially plotted in. Just gotta slightly dial down a little bit of stuff here. This area is so nice and simple here. So maybe graphically I can lighten this area up a little bit, whether it's painting or just adding a little bit of a value bump here. I'm just using color dodge just to kind of bump that area a little bit. Now, I did mention that, you know, we would do the highlights at the very, very end, and this is kind of the closing area. So I'll probably start introducing some of those highlights. Up here can just be more indication of debris. I mean, I've just kind of, I think I've visually came to the conclusion of like, okay, I wanted to figure out the entire part of the design and how all this falls, but honestly it's kind of like, well, it's not necessarily about the design of the ship because it's completely, you know, it's all messed up anyways. So let's just try to make sure that, you know, the shot reads. So if that's the case, then I just want to kind of give it a little bit of a suggestion of stuff there. And just kind of indicate some stuff. I'm just gonna add just some more debris, just more dark values here, simplify some of this stuff here. And let's add a layer, and we're gonna put this on overlay, and I'm just gonna kind of darken a lot of this stuff here. And it's almost kind of nice it being that dark and ominous. Actually, it makes it graphically very, very interesting. Going to do a slight vignette from the bottom and let it just kind of creep up so our eye can just kind of settle in and on this area. I'm just going to want to erase away just a tad bit. And get some of those brush strokes in. Maybe even some of these footprints are pretty cool. Some of these tracks and stuff. This is great for composition as well. Except we're probably not going to get that tiny a footprint since it's not that far away. Bump it up a little bit, make it darker. Let's just kind of fade it in just a tad bit more. I'm just pulling any details away using the blend modes here. We'll use that to kind of guide our eye in just a tad bit. Maybe even something over here too, just to kind of pull our attention over there. Even if it's like these little fakey lines, it really does help. Okay, let's just do some more highlights. I mean, I think for the most part we kind of covered a lot. Covered a lot of what I already wanted in this shot. I think now I just want to see if I can get a little bit of this kind of this uplight. Some of this nice like kind of bounce light look and feel. This kind of greenish yellow mustard greenish tone here. Let's just see if we can get into our scene. Just gonna color correct this bit right here. But this little tone here is something that will give us a nice little lift. Now you guys are probably looking at it like, what in the world are you doing? You're destroying everything. But I'm actually just trying to block in some value here, and then I'm going to put it on lighten, and I'm going to dial it down. Actually, use the blend modes to kind of put it into the pockets. Trying to dial it down, see if it works. Not bad. It's just to kind of have a little bit of bounce light, kind of like this lifted light source, just so it's not just a simple, you know, flat tone here. It's really subtle, but something that I always do to just kind of lift it. Another thing that actually works too is when you use, you know, I've been kind of on this whole like, you know, let's use patterns and textures from abstract paintings. There's something to it in the sense that, you know, there's a lot of nice textures and color variations that we can actually implement. So I'm actually going to pull an abstract pattern here and kind of see what it does for us. We got this bit here. It's actually kind of cool. And I'm going to put this on soft light. Well, what's great about it is, like, look at all that textural detail, man. That's badass. That's really hard to get. So it's actually really hard to paint. That's the biggest part for me, is that we get a lot of nice, you know, textures and things that, you know, we probably wouldn't have been able to get by simply just painting it. So but where I use it, I'm being very selective, and I'm only going to use it in the right areas. And most likely the areas of where I want our eye to kind of just float around, or just to really pay attention to. Because a lot of this stuff here is just, it's so far away from us. I think this kind of gives it the nice color variation that we need. Awesome. All right, let's just soften some edges here. Blend some of this out. Get some of these shadows from our rocks. Just anything that we want to really simplify, we can just go on top. Simplify more. Truly just edit out. And even a lot of this stuff here we can simplify. So I'm actually taking out this area here because it's causing too much of a shape, and I actually want this to be fairly clear. Simplify all this stuff here. Blend, smudge. Let's actually bring down the flow a little bit. Okay. Between that, let's use a little bit of a burn here. Just kind of burn some of the blacks here, just so it reads as more of a graphic shadow in the foreground. I'm gonna do a little bit of lighten. This is something that I always do as like a post, but I kind of lighten the image slightly, and then I just kind of crunch it down just so there's like a vignette as it goes away from us into the distance. It's like a nice subtle vignette. Just kind of pay attention, see if there's anything else that we need to edit or simplify. And most likely a lot of that stuff is just kind of the ground and the shadow here. Maybe you could probably use just an extra panel or something, so it's not like completely dead. I feel like this area can be just a little bit toned down. I feel like the form on that is just like so, it's just catching way too much light for what it is. I mean, it makes it less round, but I'm actually okay with that. If we want, we can actually even do something like this where I just kind of gradate it so that the light's very obvious that it's hitting very strongly here. But that way, it's actually, the form's actually slightly turning. Simplify that. And let's simplify this too, so it's not getting so much crazy light here. It's getting a little blue, so I'm gonna kind of dial this down just a tad bit. Something nice and simple about like this being flat with like just maybe a couple rocks or something in the distance. I feel like sometimes, like, again, adding too many details can start making your image too fussy looking. So, on with the editing, the never-ending paint-over editing, until you're happy with it. Gotta make sure that, you know, this guy actually has a shadow. He's casting a shadow here. All right. Well, I think that does it. Finally. I hope I don't say that, you know, this is over and I continue to paint like I'm doing right now. I always have a habit of continuing to work on this thing, even though it's like long, you know, long past due. Well, this is kind of the conclusion of the overall demo that I wanted to share with you guys. And just starting with the overall sketch here, you can see how we ended up here. And it's relatively pretty close. You know, I've obviously made a lot of creative, you know, overrided decisions on certain things. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the demo and found it insightful to this process of starting off with a sketch and basically working our way to a more finalized version. You know, as I always like to end my tutorial, let me know if you guys have any questions at all of what I've shown and the process here, and just like to thank you guys for watching and tuning in. I'll see you guys next time, and have a good one, guys. Thanks.